Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blabbit. Blabbit, as always, is brought to you by Open Doors. Open Doors is your premier communication and engagement client or partner for corporate communications. For those of you who haven't been with us before, my name is Glenn Ingram. I've been working for the better part of the last 2 decades, helping people have better listening skills and better communication skills so they may be able to influence a buying decision. Good morning, Paul. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Glenn. It's great to see you, and I'm excited to have the return of our friends, who I will introduce to you in just a moment. But for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, or for what would this be, 107th time, 108th time? Oh my goodness, where does the time go? My name's Paul Geiger, and I am a New York City public speaking consultant and presentation expert. And I work on making sure that people can be clear in their messaging. It's so easy to let things sabotage you. And I work with organizations about making sure that messaging is clear, getting it across, leading to trust, and ultimately to persuasion. And we've got a real round table here because we have been blessed to have our friends, the DoBe's Associates, returning once again. And we'll introduce them one at a time. Tony Carnesi. How are you, Tony? Please tell everyone about you.
All righty. Good morning, everyone. I am the first half of the DoBe's. I focus on the things that you need to do to take your business to the next level, to really find your vision and create your vision and make your vision a reality. I'm a recovering CPA. That's part of the reason why I focus on that doing stuff. I love to look at a financial statement. I love to see those numbers improve. So my goal is to see that happen, create a good report card so you know what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing, the things that you need to change that you're doing. And we go from there. And it was during that period of time when I was showing people what they needed to do that I realized I needed some help. And that's how I found Brian Gorman.
So that's me. I'm Brian Gorman. I am an executive coach. I am the B side of the DoBe's Associates. Who do you need to be to do those things that you know will take you forward? That's the role that I play.
Well, thank you very much for joining, guys. And I think it's probably the best time for us to kind of talk about some of the things that you guys specialize in, because as we hear from a lot of different businesses, corporations, owners, it's hard to find people to work. Once you find them, it's hard to get them to do their work. So perhaps we need a little bit of motivation or something outside the box to create a better work environment. So if you would share with us kind of what's gone on since we spoke last time in your path to a 4-day work week.
Glenn, I just want to touch on something you just said. Now people are saying it's hard to find people and to keep good people. I remember sitting at a round table 10 years ago with a bunch of business owners and another person like ourselves. And he went around the table and he asked each business owner what was their issue. And each one of them said, can't find good help. This is 10 years ago. And when it came to me, I said, you know what the help is saying? The help is saying, we can't find a good boss. Mm-hmm. So, I just, since you brought that up, I wanted to share with you that things haven't changed too much in that sense. Don't get me wrong, because things have changed a lot. But in that sense, some of that perception is still the same. Brian, you look like you're ready to go. So go ahead, go.
Yeah, actually, was just talking with a colleague the other day who was writing an article on quiet quitting. We used to call it retiring on the job. Again, in some senses, nothing has changed, except the problem is getting more and more severe. And ultimately, the problem is getting more and more severe because managers continue to follow what Douglas McGregor called Theory X and treat people like interchangeable parts of the organization. Treat them like all they bring to the table are their skills. You can't find good people. You can't get good people and keep good people. It means you're not leading them the way that they're ready to be led. One of the first things that Tony and I focus on, whether it's with the CEO, the owner, or anywhere down into the organization, is what gets you up and excited about coming to work every day? And then what gets those people who report to you up and excited and coming to work every day? Sadly, some leaders, some CEOs, some entrepreneurs can't even answer the first of those questions because they've lost that passion, that connection to the passion. But even those who can, most can't answer the second question. And once they can, they begin to realign the work so that employees are engaged. They're committed to the organization. They're committed to their team. They're committed to their clients. They're committed to the quality of work. It turns the picture around.
And, you know, gentlemen, you're offering up, it almost sounds like an inevitability. In other words, it's always been that way. Somehow we have to change it. And I don't want to make it seem like this is just surely hypothetical or doomsday, but can you give us an example of maybe a case study where a leader, a business owner started in point A, and then what was the mindset shift? And then what were the actions that led them to become a better boss? Because it sounds like we're offering up a chicken, which came first, the chicken or the egg? But in reality, as a business owner, you've got to be a leader. So do you have an example? Do you have something that you have seen firsthand that would help our audience wrap our head around this huge, huge concept?
Brian, would you like to go first on that?
Go for it.
Okay. Well, you know, bottom line is it ain't rocket science. Okay. Let's be clear with the listeners. That ain't what it is. One of our favorite people came to us, I guess it was 4 years ago, Brian, and we were talking to him on a Zoom. And he had a grand vision of his business. He's a financial advisor, and he's one of the tops in the organization he works for. He's the number one financial advisor, okay, across the country. That's what he has become over the last 4 years. Number one. He shared with us his grand vision of what he had in his mind for his business, down to the details of what the conference room would look like, how many people were working for him, the type of work that he was doing. And we asked him, Joe, have you ever asked your employees what their visions are? Because you've just shared with us this fabulous grand vision. And at that point in time, he had 7 employees. He now has 36, just to be clear on the growth pattern, 4 or 5 years. He said, no, I've never, ever done that. And it was after our conversation with him that day, he decided to do that. And Brian, do you want to take it from here on some of Joe's responses to that?
Yeah. So again, as Tony said, he had 7 employees at the time. He took each of them to lunch one-on-one and asked that question. Again, the growth at that time, he was number one in his region. With this growth, he's now number one in the nation. And he continues to have that conversation in an ongoing way because each of us evolve in what our excites us, what our passions are, what our interests are. One other thing related to this I want to bring up, in coaching clients, I have been shocked over the last 4 months. I have had 4 clients say to me, I want to have a conversation with my boss about the fact that I am no longer challenged and excited by my job. I think each of us sitting on this screen would have never considered having that conversation when we were in our 20s or 30s. So there is an evolution not only in the worker, but also in the environment, at least in some organizations, that invites a less engaged employee to say, boss, help me find a place in this organization where I can be challenged again.
And
That
if I may
Go ahead.
add just something that I heard from somebody who Brian and I spoke to a number of months ago, and she doesn't want to go back to the office, and her staff, they want her back. She has suffered a great amount of turnover. She keeps complaining that she can't keep employees. By not going back, she's being selfish. And the question I raised to her is, well, how are you connecting with your employees if you're not going back to the office? And again, there are ways to connect with your employees at the office or not at the office. But clearly, she's not connecting with the needs of her employees. And it's like a broken record. She doesn't want to change. She wants a bigger company, but she doesn't want to do the things that's necessary to do so. And one of those, the client that we just spoke about, Joe, he connected.
If
Sorry
I
to
could,
interrupt you, Glenn, but I just wanted to stick
You're
that in
good.
there.
yeah, and
Go,
I
Brian.
just now want to add one more point. Recently had a conversation with Chris DeSantis, who is author of a book, Why I Find You Irritating. And it's a book about intergenerational conflict at work. And one of the vital points he makes for every one of us in the workplace is that as parents, we raise our children to fit the generation they're growing up in. As managers and as leaders, we expect them to behave according to our generation's rules and mindsets. And so, again, one of the things Tony and I so often talk about is ask questions and listen.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's kind of interesting how it keeps going back to the old adage is we all have two ears and one mouth for a reason. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to understand how to ask a different question to Tony versus a question you're going to ask to Paul versus a question you're asked for Glenn. So as we're talking to these business owners, middle management, and employees, how do we help them understand how to have a difficult conversation and how to not be afraid to ask questions, and more importantly, how to listen?
I think you have to ask them to look at themselves first and say, so here you are in this current environment. People are saying they want to be more engaged. They want to have more value in what they do. They want to be heard. Number one, what is your current MO? And it takes sort of, you have to be honest with yourself. How many business owners have this sort of, they think who they aren't. They have to really look around and say, who are they? And the best place to ask is maybe your spouse, for starters, your partner. Get some guts and now go to some of your key employees and ask some questions. And like Brian just said, ask the questions and listen. But that's the only way you can start, is opening up. I mean, Brian quoted X and Y managers a little while ago. And for those who are not familiar, the X managers, that manager who comes in, tells you, this is what you're doing today. There's no connection. Mm-hmm. Make sure you sit at your desk for 8 hours. The Y manager is, this is what we need to do. Can I help you? Let's make sure we get it done by a certain time. Okay, you check in with me on the way. And you've got these X managers, and if people don't want to look at that, they're not going to change.
Now, on the topic of asking questions, do you often caution your clients that they may not be getting the truthful responses that they expect the first time around? Because if you have a personality for being a hard driver and being a my way or the highway, to use a very blatant stereotype of a type of leader, but if that is your personality and all of a sudden you're asking questions, wouldn't it take 2 or 3 interactions like that for some employees to actually come around to delivering a truthful answer?
Paul, there could be 1,000 interactions like that without getting the truthful answer. So much of the work that we do is about building trust with your employees, because until there's trust, there isn't going to be truth.
And just to add on to that, the example of the person I was just talking about, she asked her client, her cousin, her people, so do you really want me in the office? And then they backed off. There was a backing off of, well, it would. And my first sense was, they don't trust you to be honest with their answer. What have you done up until now so they don't trust you? What can you do differently? You need to come to them being a different person. In order to do this, you need to be somebody different. And if you are that person that they don't want to open up to, as Brian said, it could take a lot of conversations, and it really comes down to opening up, sharing with your people some vulnerability. What is your vision? It hasn't gotten there. What do you need? And if you can start being vulnerable and transparent with your people, they may start to trust you. So they have to see that trust come from you first. I made a big mistake this year. We should have gone in this direction. I need some help with that. This is the reason why I made those decisions. Be honest. I mean, how many business owners don't want to be honest with their employees, and they think, oh, I'm hiding behind my door in my office. I'm not going to tell you that. I'm not going to tell you this. That's that ex-manager mentality.
If I can very quickly,
these issues are as old as time. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, if I can very quickly, we actually use a neuroscience-based model for building trust, and it comes from the work of Judith Glasser. Just very briefly, the acronym is TRUST. Transparency, as Tony mentioned. A piece of the transparency is, this is what I need from you. It's not just, this is where we're going. This is why I made these decisions. This is what I need from you in order for us to move forward. R is relationship. That's the relationship of seeing the world through the other's eyes. That Gen Zer is not driven by his salary or her salary. Boomers, we were driven by salary. We were driven by job security. We were driven by titles. Don't assume that everyone that works for you has the same motivations. Learn to see the world as they see it. You is understanding. And that's that understanding that comes from really deeply listening for what's not being said, watching the body language and tone say a whole lot more than the words. S is shared success. That's not, we agree on the words, because every one of us sitting on this screen has more than once been engaged in an organization where everyone agrees on the words and they're all going in different directions. It's really working through those difficult conversations to come to a shared understanding of the goals. And T is telling the tough truths with caring and candor. And again, that's something that so many managers and leaders have a hard time doing. They're either totally candid or they're so caring that people don't hear how badly they're being viewed.
Those are really interesting acronyms. And as you were describing that, Brian, I was just thinking, because I'm really a language guy, a messaging guy, how do you get that across? And the thing that hit me first is how strong the emotional pull is for people to be helpful. And you touched on it, and Tony touched on it. In other words, I could use your help with this. And I think that's a wonderful way to begin to open the door, and then to really truthfully show appreciation for what it is that they are willing to do for you and assistance for you following this path of vision that you possess. What were you going to say, Glenn?
Well, I think I would like to know what your kind of perception is when we talk about timelines for something like this to happen, because we always have been taught since the time we were in middle school that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. But in an organization like this, where it may take you up to 1,000 communications to do this, how much can you shorten that timeline by bringing in a third party that they're not afraid to talk to that can be honest to both sides and launch the communication to put them in a more positive situation.
Well, that's Brian. You want to take it, or else I got a thought.
Go for it, Tony. I'll build on it.
We've helped people grow from less than double-digit employees to well into the 30 and 40s. And I got to tell you, it's interesting, when you say, should you bring in somebody, not to use that dirty word, should, but when you bring in somebody, I can't tell you how many businesses I walk into and I'm so impressed with them. And they say, oh yeah, I've been working with a coach for X amount of years. I've been working for a consultant for X amount of years. And the proof is the proof is right there in front of you in Technicolor, in human Technicolor. Every time I walk into a successful business, I can't tell you, they've all asked for help. They've brought in somebody to help them do that. Bottom line, whether it's us or somebody else, bringing in somebody else to help you start those conversations. And with Brian and I, when we talk to the team, we make a pact. What says between us and the team versus the El Jefe, this goes no further. And that trust that we create, they start talking, and then we help facilitate that discussion with El Jefe. With them, we don't tell them. We ask them, okay, what do you want to say to the boss today? And now we've helped coach them. This is neat how you do it. And the vice versa. Brian, how many times do we talk to El Jefe? How do I talk to this difficult employee? Okay. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah. We're all blind to the world we're living in. The old saying, the last thing fish ever learn about is water. Bringing in a third party really brings in a new perspective, a perspective that doesn't have hidden agendas, that doesn't have their own purposes for being there, and so forth. So it's always useful. It's always useful. And I'll make a plug. I have been working with my coach since 2007. So even coaches need coaches, even leaders need people who know how to lead to help them learn.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Well, here we go. Now I get to insert the selfish perspective for just a moment. And this is one I've heard in the ramp up to today's episode. And that is, how much closer or further away are we from the 4-day work week? Because everybody would love to have that be a reality across the board. Does it vary, or is that slowly but surely becoming more of the norm? What have you guys seen?
I'm going to jump in real quick and let Tony follow me here. My personal belief is that we are in the early stages of the equivalent of the start of the Industrial Revolution. That the Monday through Friday 9 to 5 model will fade and fade and fade. The new model will be some version of what we call, and what we have actually trademarked here in the US, 4-day work week. What we mean by that is not Monday to Thursday, or Tuesday to Friday, or Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. The new model is going to be, and we don't mean compressing 40 hours into 4 days. The new model is going to be a flexible model. It's not even going to be industry driven. It's going to be driven by the model that serves your employees, your customers or clients, and your organization. And it may be 4 days. It may be 5 days. It may be 6 days of 5 hours a day. Who knows? It's going to vary business by business by business. And I'll let Tony pick it up from there.
And from that flexible viewpoint, I read so much. I have this, and again, the 4-day global campaign is somebody who's here in the US. And right now, their big part of their audience has been not-for-profits, because the not-for-profits can't pay as much, and they're looking for that competitive edge. And I read a lot of articles of companies moving to a 4-day work week. And I don't believe half of it. Like most things that we read, we really can't believe a whole lot of it, because when we talk to business owners, when they present that to their staff, there's a whole lot of resistance. And just keep in mind, I'm just going to remind everybody, we are the true 4-day work week people in the United States of America, not the 4-day global campaign. In fact, they are infringing on our trademark. There's a war coming. And on that note, I really look at the 4-day work week as what Brian just said. It's flexible, and it really depends on the evolution of your management and you as a leader. Focus on the results. What system in your organization will work to get the results that you need done? Because some customers need you 5 days a week, okay? And there's no working way. It's very hard to work around that. But how do you keep your people happy, knowing that they can go somewhere else and maybe somebody will offer? What do they really truly want? So it's going to evolve. And then you look at the environmental factors. I just read that New York City, because offices are empty, tax, the money, New York City is going to be dealing with some very difficult financial issues coming up. And I'm sure that's going to be applied to many cities across the country. What are they going to do? For example, the mayor of New York City first said everybody has to come back to work about 9 months ago, and now he's done an about face. But the folks down in Wall Street are still trying to posture and say you need to come in. So I think from an individual standpoint, the people standpoint in an organization, they want that flexibility. But now, metropolitan areas and cities and real estate, they have needs too. What's going to happen? So, that's going to affect the reality of the 4-day work week really settling in and the hybrid workforce and people coming back. But the 4-day work week is a metaphor for the flexibility that you must offer your employees. And if you could do a 4-day work, it could be, I get a 4-day work week this week, but not next week. It could really, and again, it depends on the maturity and your ability of your management teams and leaders to implement it to a point where it's successful. And there's going to be a lot of trial and error. It's not snapping your fingers and it's going to work. The things I read online about how many companies are successful, I'd really like to see the truth in that, because this is not an easy shift, and it takes a great amount of dedication.
Well,
If I can,
go ahead.
If I can pick up on one thing Tony said, and it goes back to some of the earlier things we were talking about. Employees are demanding a new way of working. The most skilled employees in the most demand professions are going to be the first ones out the door if your organization is not meeting what they are looking for in their professional lives. And so this is going to be an evolution, and it is a revolution in the relationship between employer and employee. More than one business leader and researcher in the whole topic of work and the economy and so forth have put forth that the employer is no longer in charge. The role of the employer is now to better understand and address and serve the needs of the employee.
Well, I think we need to fire all those employees, and we start over, and then it'll get back to where it should be. But anyway, here's the problem I see in this whole evolution. And I come to it from a point where I've worked virtually for years. It's been the way I've done what I do. And my working with and coaching other people in this industry is we, as humans, tend to screw off and waste time. Doesn't matter if you're sitting at the office or if you're in front of your computer. So it's coming up with what I call working blocks, where I'm going to work for 25 minutes on one thing, shut everything off, take a 5-minute break, or I'm going to work for 50 minutes and take a 10-minute break. So it's how do we make sure to change it from a dollars for hours to money for productivity, because over the years, I don't care how many hours you work. If you get this amount of stuff done in 5 hours, awesome. If it takes you 10 hours, whatever, I just want X amount of productivity for Y dollars. And how are we going to get those people that are management to let go of this pen and not squeeze it to death and understand that I'm no longer trading dollars for hours. I'm trading money for results.
I'm going to let Tony jump in on this quickly, but what I'm going to say is the way you don't do it. And we just read an article in the New York Times within the last month, and I think it's 7 of the top 10 largest companies in the United States are going absolutely in the opposite direction, Glenn, by measuring keystrokes, by randomly photographing from people's cameras on their computers to see if they're sitting at their screens and so forth. That is not how you do it. I'll let Tony talk about how you do it.
If you hold on one second, Tony, and let me confirm that the reason why that's bad. I've been working with people overseas for a decade, and there is software that could do that stuff. And initially, I made that mistake. And then I went to, this is what I expect for you to get done. And I have had people now that have worked for me for 4, 5, 6 years, and I pay it slightly more. I give slightly better bonuses, and they have 2 requirements. At 8 o'clock in the morning, I want to talk to you so you know what's important for the day. At the end of the day, I want to know what you've done. I don't care if you work 4 hours, go spend 3 hours with your children, then do 4 hours late at night. As long as the productivity is there, I'm happy, and they seem to be happy because they continue to work with us.
So, Glenn, I'm going to turn this around on you. What gave you that epiphany to change? Why?
It was a waste of my time to go in and micromanage people. I hate. I'm going to say one more time, hate micromanagement. So I'm not going to waste my time making sure Tony did his job. If Tony can't get what I want done, I'd rather fire Tony and find somebody that can work on their own, be self-sufficient, and that way I'm not wasting my time worrying about what Tony's doing.
Actually, Glenn, I could imagine you in a policeman's uniform.
Well, I think, Glenn, you nail it. If when you take an organization and you have a manager who does the micromanaging and another that doesn't, I think leadership will see that difference in the results and the turnover. And those people who are sticking to their guns of, oh no, you've got to have your tush sitting in your desk, and I got to see you in front of your screen, and I got to see those keystrokes.
Fine. So it does make perfect sense.
And you create your own flexible work schedule. You don't have to ask your boss to do it for you. You've done it.
Right.
Well, I think I blinked somehow, Paul, because our hour has gone by.
Oh, it happens with these guys. I tell you, these two.
So if anyone would like to learn how to do more and be more, oh, hold on a second. I apologize. We missed a question. Let's answer this question real quick, Paul.
Yeah.
So for the last year, I was able to work 4 10-hour days. By the last hour, I was not worth much, especially the last hour of the 4th day. Extra days off was a recovery than a bonus. How do you apply that to a 4-10? I know you mentioned earlier that just a 4-day work week didn't mean more hours.
Exactly. Our 4-day work week is that flexibility. It's not pushing 10 hours into each of 4 days. It again is taking out that non-productive time. It's focusing not on the time, but on the results.
So I missed Lisa's question, so I apologize, Lisa. Now back to what I was saying. If somebody would like to learn how to do more and be more, what's the best way to reach you to?
Okay. I am Tony, Tony, at DoBeAssociates.com. That's DO-BE-Associates.com. We are at www.do-beassociates.com. Brian?
I'm Brian, Brian, at do-beassociates.com. Our podcast, It's Doobie Time, is on our website, and it's available on many podcast platforms. Because, Tony?
When times get tough in business,
it's Doobie Time.
Right.
And we publish Enlightened Management every Tuesday on LinkedIn.
And I love the tongue-in-cheek that it's doobie time with enlightened information.
There you go.
Taking it to the next level. It's a whole different consciousness.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us here today. It's been a great show.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank
and
you.
Really appreciate it.
All right, everyone. We'll see you back at the same time next week. Take care, everyone.